What's up, guys? It's April 16th, 2018. It is Q&A time. This week is contest prep questions. Done this topic before. There'll probably be some repeat topics, obviously, but heavy show season right now, spring, fall are pretty heavy show season, summertime. So with that said, I want to go ahead and bring this topic back up again. I got some really good questions all on Facebook today. I didn't put a thread on Instagram, so sorry about that. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get started. Starting prep in a good place. What are some must-haves that you will look for or attempt to fix if needed in order to get an athlete in the right spot, so to speak, to begin prep? Have you ever done a prep where the athlete, where the client was suboptimal? What happened, good or bad? All right. Actually did a whole entire podcast episode on this. It is not out yet. I don't think. It might be. If it is, I'll share it. But anyhow, there's some obvious things that you do want to have in place. Make sure that metabolically the person's healthy, hormonally the person's healthy. Maybe that requires blood work. It's not a bad idea. Financially, make sure they're healthy enough to prep. Make sure that mentally they're where they need to be to prep. And those are really broad things. I mean, there's going to be a lot of details within each of those categories, and there's some other subcategories, if you will. But metabolically and hormonally, I mean, those are the biggest things, and mentally, obviously, metabolism and hormones. If someone just came off a cut or something, not going to want to go into prep. We need adequate time, and if they just prepped, you're not going to want to go into another prep. Actually, I believe the case studies, or the couple of case studies that some of the guys have done, some of the research guys, and I believe they were all done on natural male bodybuilders. But anyhow, they were showing something like 6 months before all the markers return to normal. I mean, that's a huge amount of time, and you want to be normal for a relatively good amount of time before actually going back into a prep. So even once a year is tough for a lot of people. That's really kind of a maximum thing that a lot of people will be able to get away with, depending on how harsh the prep is, obviously. With that said, I always encourage people to start with me before prep. If they even mention prep to me, I ask them, when is it? We need to get started as soon as possible. And that's not just to make money from that client. It's the fact that I want to make sure that I understand their body. I want to make sure that their metabolism is healthy, that their intake is as good as it's going to be, that they're not doing a ton of cardio, that I can check their hormones and do all of those things, see where they're at mentally. So those, ideally that's what I want to do. I have just had clients come to me at just prepped right off the bat. If they're in, kind of in that, have those things in line. But then again, I mean, I've had a ton of scenarios where they aren't in line, and it's kind of a judgment call. If someone comes to me and things are really off, let's say maybe it's an enhanced athlete, they have just got off a big cycle and they, or whatever. And well, now their hormones are suboptimal. Their blood work is shot, and they want to go right back into a contest prep. So red flag. Maybe it's someone that had just done a prep recently, like I said, red flag. So one of those scenarios pops up. Pick a later show. I mean, that's the best solution. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes we can still make it work. Normally my disclaimer with those things is, hey, if you are 4 weeks out or 6 weeks out or 8 weeks out or whatever, and I don't like what's happening, I'm afraid that things are too down-regulated already, I will pull the plug. That I'm straight up with people right off the bat. If they're okay with that, then we might go forward with it. Hopefully they'll let me do a rebuilding phase, the sensitizing and all those things, and they agree to that. Some people just don't, and I know that if I don't work with them, they're going to go to somebody that didn't care where they were to begin with. It's going to take their money, and is going to do all those things, whatever, to get him in shape with no regard for all the things that were off in the first place. So I keep that in mind, and I'll work with them, but I give them that disclaimer up front. Have I ever had anything bad happen? Well, luckily, I mean, I can pretty much pull the plug on something if I think it's going to be bad, and you can't always tell. I mean, even in the best prep, you can't always tell. There's preps where you go into it, everything's good, you have to push someone hard, and you know that that's kind of inevitable. You do all the right things to recover, and they just don't recover very well. It does happen. I mean, nothing's foolproof. It can happen. It's happened. I've had it happen before, not often, but it's definitely happened. So I know those are just kind of broad generalizations, but that's kind of what the main categories that I'm looking for. And once that episode comes out, if it hasn't already, like I said, I can't remember, I can post that up. And that it goes way into depth. The whole entire episode is, are you ready to prep? That's the whole episode. So you can pretty much get everything you need there. This next question feeds right into this last one pretty well. When would be the cutoff point that you would tell a client to back out of a prep? So there's some things to consider here. Do they have to travel? Do they have to book a flight even? Do they need to, their hotel, whatever, they need to get their suit? Do they need a tan? When do they have to enter the show? Well, what about work, their work situation? When do they have to request time off for work if they need that? And so on and so forth. So I'm kind of taking those things into consideration. It's going to vary person to person. For some people, I mean, you can run it all the way up to a couple weeks out. If they're cool with it and we have to back out and push the show out later, then we'll do it. But for other people, they need to know before that. So I need a realistic outlook on, okay, they're 4 weeks out. I just not really comfortable with where things are at. We need to back out. Or we need to just back out of the prep entirely, or whatever it might be. It really depends on those things, the financial things, the planning things, all that. Otherwise, someone could go right up to show week and back out on show week if they wanted to. I mean, obviously that'd be extremely disappointing, but it is what it is. Hopefully they didn't lose any money or anything. I mean, I really try to avoid any situation like that, but yeah, it just comes really down to all those kind of planning factors. As a coach, how do you handle clients going off plan during prep? Example, client eating a free meal when not in their protocol. Well, when stuff like that happens, whether it's prep or not, I'm not the type of coach that really comes down hard on people. Depending on the type of person, you normally get a read on people and kind of know what they react to psychologically, but man, I just don't find it that beneficial to ream people for it. I tell them, look, I mean, hey, this is on you. And a lot of times I'm so disappointed in myself, and they always reiterate the fact that they let me down and they're disappointed with me. And I'm like, hey, look, this is your thing. It's not that I don't care. It's that you're letting yourself down way more than you're letting me down. I'm here to give you direction. I'm here to give you the best instruction that I can. If you don't use it, that's on you. That has nothing to do with you letting me down. That is totally on you. You should feel like you let yourself down. You need to answer to yourself at that point. You're spending your money, you're taking your time, you're wasting your time. So all those things. Now, if it's an issue where it's a reoccurring thing, some kind of disordered eating or something, that's a little bit different scenario. We need to kind of tread lightly there, maybe touch on that a little bit. But if it's just a one-time screw up, you make the best of it and try to move on and let them know, hey, that's on you. I'll guilt people a little bit, I'm not guilting them like I'm mad, but I guilt them like, hey, you letting yourself down, that's on you. Whatever, you're the one who has to be able to sleep at night knowing, do you want to, go through the rest of this prep knowing that you messed up a bunch? Probably not. I can only fix so many screw ups. We only have so much time. So I'll almost kind of guilt them like that. That's just how I try to make them see the significance of it without me just being an asshole to them. That's not really the drill sergeant type. So next one, how to maintain optimal digestion and gut health while it's dieting. It's not really going to be any different than in a surplus. I mean, there are some different factors. Food gets low enough, then the volume of food that you're eating is low. Sometimes that slows digestion just because there's not a lot of waste to pass. Fiber intake might get low, so you have to make sure that you're still maintaining enough fiber. And then overall systemic stress is probably high. Not systemic stress from inflammation like eating a lot of food, but you're systemically stressed from cardio, training. Your body's probably a little beat down or maybe a lot beat down. So all of those things are probably interrupting digestion. Maybe you're overstimulated, so your parasympathetic nervous system isn't working well enough to stimulate digestion. It's too much sympathetic nervous system. So you might even need to do some soft belly breathing, meditation, anything to kind of slow you down before you eat. That's always helpful. Not eating too fast, that's always a good one. But I mean, in prep or dieting, you have less calories and you tend to eat faster because you're hungrier. So, don't eat so fast. But outside of that, I mean, keeping your immune system healthy, it might be something like introducing a potent probiotic formula to help with gut flora because immune system function might be a little down. Controlling those stressors, overall inflammation, all those things that I mentioned. But other than that, it's not really a whole lot different. If it's a food sensitivity issue, then address it. If it's if you're not getting enough fiber or you need more insoluble or soluble or whatever, address it. If it's you're not digesting fats well or carbs well, address it. It's kind of an individualistic type of thing. All right, next one. What is your protocol when a female approaches you wanting to compete for the first time and you've never worked with her before, but she discusses she has struggled with anorexia and anxiety and has mitral valve failure, so even caffeine is not an option for her? Please advise. Thank you so much. And the other one, there's a comment that says, or binge eating disorder. So now the disordered eating thing could be a male too. I mean, there's guys that have disordered eating. Trust me, I've worked with several. But for the sake of this question, I'm just generalizing it. The two things in here, the mitral valve failure, first and foremost on that's a health concern that you definitely need to address with a doctor. I know what it is. I know that not to abuse it, but I'm not a doctor and I'm not going to, I'm not really going to dive into that too far. If you have to take medication, take your medication. You need to follow up with your doctor. We need to monitor those things. And then obviously not overstimulate your heart with too many stimulants or any stimulants for that matter, depending on the case. And keeping stress in check, things that we can do, plenty of parasympathetic nervous system activation, keeping you calm outside of the gym, and so on and so forth. Maybe even straying away from HIIT cardio too much. I have had some people where we've had to do that just because of the massive heart rate spikes. Not commonly, but I've had to do it. So that could be something as well. As far as the disordered eating goes, if someone comes to me like this, I really am extremely hesitant to let them prep at all, to be honest. Maybe not never, but just at that point in time, simply because, well, we know that prep can easily exacerbate those issues and or create them to begin with. But I'm probably not going to prep that person, to be completely honest, in most cases. And what I'm going to suggest normally is I'm probably going to want them to go through at least, one or two surplus and deficit phases that we're making some progression. We're getting a routine established. They can go through these phases without episodes, without any of these episodes, with their anorexia or binge eating disorder. And if they can do that and establish the lifestyle beforehand, it's consistent, then the transition into the prep is very, very easy because really not a lot changes at that point. So that's probably best case scenario, because you could look at this from another direction too. Even somebody that doesn't have eating disorders and they go through a rough prep, I mean, they can end up with one afterwards. I mean, that's why I like to have people go through these, deficit and surplus phases, experience both ends of the spectrum properly, see what it feels like for them, just in general, and for them specifically, how their body reacts, how they feel mentally, maybe what it does to their habits and their lifestyle, all those things, going through those phases before they've ever prepped, whether they have an eating disorder or not. Because if they don't, they might after the prep, if they don't have this lifestyle established. So it goes both ways. I probably wouldn't prep them until I establish those kind of set points there. What are your thoughts on back-to-back or year-to-year preps and perhaps lack of time to improve? Well, it's not that you can't improve year to year. You certainly can. More experienced lifters that kind of have to scratch and claw for progress probably aren't going to improve like that. You prep for whatever, 4 or 5 months, maybe more. You do a show. You basically are in prep half the year. And you have 6 months. Part of it you're just recovering. Part of it you might actually be progressing. You might put on a couple pounds, maybe, in a year. Maybe a little bit more, depending on the person. If you play your cards just right, maybe 5 even on stage weight. And I've definitely seen more, like cases where you could come out of a good show prep and utilize the post-show period well. It's probably not going to happen every single time that you do it. But, if you nail it just right and the stars align, then yeah, you can definitely make some progress. But it's not really ideal. But again, it's going to kind of depend on what kind of improvements they're looking for. If they're wanting to jump weight classes, 15, 20 pounds, 10 pounds, you're probably going to need a little bit more time. If they're at the top of their class, they just want to add a couple more pounds and get a little bit better for their class next year. Maybe they're a national level competitor. They're a heavyweight. They weighed in at 220 one year. They want to have to struggle to make 225 or 224 the following year. Probably pull that off in a year if you do everything just right. That's reasonable. But if they want to move up to supers and weigh, 235 plus and be peeled, well, probably not. So again, really just depends on those factors. But yeah, I mean, you're not really going to have sufficient time to improve. And for some people, it might not even be enough time to just recover metabolically, hormonally, all of those things, depending on how harsh the prep was on them. You might get away with it for a couple years, and it just progressively gets harder and harder and harder because you just never quite fully recover. Okay. One more. How have you helped your clients pull out of negative contest prep mentality? Well, that can mean a lot of things, but in my mind, it's that, to me, that kind of means that when people get into that mindset, prep is a punishment. Okay? And that's what I try to get through to them, is this isn't a punishment. Yeah, you might feel like it is. You might feel pretty rough. You might feel terrible at times, whatever. But it's not a punishment. It's, you chose to do it. You're experiencing things that are probably relatively normal for contest prep. It's not just you doing it. There's other people doing it, and on down the line, whatever kind of, stuff I want to pitch them. But again, I just really try to get through that. It's not don't feel sorry for them, don't feel sorry for yourself type of mentality. Try to get them out of that. Try to get them out of the, I can't live my life, I'm a prisoner type of thing. I can't go out of my house and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you might feel like it, but the more you can the more you can kind of keep things normalized, the better. And another podcast, I talked about that in. So in I think it was the Are You Ready for Prep one. So maybe that one hasn't come out since there's been a couple questions that were covered there. But yeah, just don't be a prisoner, don't feel like a prisoner. If there's any specific negatives, I can address them. But in general, that's kind of what I see with a lot of people. Just because, it is hard. It can affect your life. But it's your choice. If you truly hate it and you truly have a bad experience, and no matter what I say or do can help you, then just don't do it. Just don't prep. It's not, you don't have to prep. Just because your buddy competes, you don't have to compete. So yeah, it's kind of my 2 cents on that. But I will cut it here, guys. About 20 minutes. Perfect one. I'll talk to you guys next week, and thanks for the questions.